What's up, everybody? In this video, we're going to be looking at the two presidential nominees' plans for addressing the housing costs increases and the housing shortage. We're in a unique time in the real estate market. Massive housing shortages and costs have risen dramatically. And today is November 4th, 2024. Tomorrow's the big election. Make sure you get out there and vote, regardless of who you vote for. It is our civic duty to get out there and cast a ballot. And the article we're citing and referencing here today comes from the Savannah Morning News, Savannah, Georgia. They are kind of talking about Savannah, Georgia, but the article really gives a good kind of snapshot of each one of the nominees' plans to address housing. So, what they talk about here, this is a very good point. Housing prices have doubled the pace of income growth over 30 years. And 40% of Savannah households could not afford a place to live during the time of study. So housing prices have doubled, 2x'd the income growth. Think about that. The housing costs and housing prices are rising much more rapidly than income, right? This also says that the county in Savannah is facing a supply shortage of 10,000 units on a national scale. You see here, the U.S. is facing such a housing crunch, with the country also a housing deficit in the millions of homes. So it's no secret there is a housing shortage, and both of the candidates are kind of have a little different plan, but they're both talking about it. So there's really two approaches here. They're talking about increasing the supply of housing, and then number two is making it easier for people to buy housing. All right. So Trump is talking about reducing mortgages. And by the way, this is a very bipartisan video. All politicians, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, they're going to say whatever sounds good to kind of get elected. Okay. Both of these plans we're going to be getting into for both candidates, there's holes in both of them, just so everybody knows. They all sound great. This is a politician's job, is to make everything seem rosy, and this is what they're going to do. We got to remember at the end of the day, regardless of what these plans are, this stuff's still got to make it through Congress. There's a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through, regardless of the nominee, regardless of the plan. So oftentimes they all sound rosy, but there's still a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through to execute any of this stuff. So on both sides of the aisle, we're bipartisan in this video here, okay? So Republican nominee, Mr. Donald Trump, former President Donald Trump, is talking about reducing mortgages by cutting inflation. It's a little bit contradictory, I'll tell you right now. The way you fight inflation is by actually raising interest rates, not cutting interest rates. So again, that's a perfect example. It sounds great, but is it realistic? Probably not. Opening limited federal land for new home construction, and then using tax incentives to promote home ownership. Okay, so it sounds good. Where is this federal land? Most of the federal land that I know of is like wilderness land and protected sanctuary type of wilderness and national parks and things like that. So it's just not clear, right? So where is this land? Are we just popping up new cities? So again, sounds great. And then using tax incentives. And then Kamala Harris's plan also talks about tax incentives. That's actually probably the most realistic for a politician, for an administration to create incentives. The easiest way for them to do so is through taxes and incentives. So using tax incentives to promote home ownership, again, it sounds good, not a lot of clarity. And then when it comes to, Trump is running on the fact that open border policies are driving up housing costs. And Trump said deporting undocumented immigrants will lower housing prices. So there's actually some truth to that. The Federal Reserve did a study, and during the vice presidential debate, J.D. Vance had cited an article by the Federal Reserve study that did say that there is some impact to the amount of immigrants coming into our country driving up housing costs. So on face value, I would say, without seeing that, I would probably be one to say, who knows if that's true or not, but there actually is some truth to that. Key proposals for the Harris campaign include low-income housing tax credit And also, this credit has subsidized over 3 million housing units since its creation. That's already in effect. So they're talking about just expanding that, and that's realistic. And then providing, this is a whopper right here, and this is crazy. Providing a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. You want to talk about inflation? You want to talk about making this problem worse? You go ahead and give a $25,000 down payment assistance program, because you know what that's going to do, everybody, is it's going to turn all these people who are on the sidelines right now into buyers. When you subsidize buyers before you subsidize supply, right? When you just give this down payment assistance, but you don't do anything about the supply issue, it's going to drive prices up. So that would have a contradictory effect. It's easier to print money than it is to build houses. So again, this is just politics here, everybody. It sounds good, $25,000 down payment assistance. Hey, let's drop 25 grand on a bunch of people and help them buy a house. Well, now all these people are competing against the same limited amount of inventory. So it would drive prices up if you don't do anything about the supply issue. This is an interesting fact, and this is good. It's true. When you do increase the supply, housing costs come down. So they cite basically apartment houses. There's been a lot of apartment houses that have been built in markets like Jacksonville, Atlanta, and Austin, and they've seen a large decrease. I believe it's like a 9% decrease in rents simply because the supply is increasing. There you go, right here. The inventory grew by 9%, and they saw an 8% decrease in the costs, in rent costs. So when you increase supply, the cost is going to come down, which is good. The same story should work for home purchases. So Kamala is running on, they're going to build, I think the number was 3 million houses. Again, it sounds good, everybody. Where are these houses going to be built? Not to mention the sheer time it would take. First, you got to pass that through Congress, right? And then let's pretend you did get it passed. Where are these 3 million houses going to be built? It sounds a little bit like pie in the sky. Who knows if it would ever go through? It sounds good. In theory, it would work. You increase the supply, the costs come down. That's proven right here. This is what we're seeing in these places like Austin and Jacksonville. 8% decrease in rent costs because they saw a 9% increase in the supply. But that's from the private sector, right? These are private sector developers building, right? Private sector is always going to get things done faster and more efficient than the government. So talk about a heavy lift, right? If the government tries to build millions of homes, who knows if that's ever going to go through, and it's just a big mess. They're talking about using tax credits to incentivize building housing units. That's the most realistic. And I'll go back to what I said about Trump's thing. That is the way to do this. That is the most efficient way to solve this problem. The way to solve the problem is increase supply. And the way to do that is to incentivize private people like me and you, private developers. Incentivize people to build new homes instead of trying to lift this heavy lift by yourself, the government. Instead, incentivize the public to build new homes, right? Make it easier, cut some regulations. That's how you do it. So, it just says I would still say you might want to move towards generally increasing the supply. So not only for low-income homes, but all homes, increasing the supply in the market could have a trickle-down effect on the entire supply across the spectrum, of course. And this last thing here, look at this. Down payment assistance might seem like a good idea, but essentially you'll just end up exacerbating the problem if the supply does not change fast enough. So it would be much easier for them to pass this down payment assistance than it would be to actually build these homes. Because how long does it take to go through the red tape? It says right here, for a multifamily construction, it takes on average 17 and a half months for completion. And that's after receiving building permits. How long does it take to get the building permits? That could be more months. We're talking almost 2 years to get this stuff built, right? It would take much quicker. It would happen much sooner to just pass a bill, drop $25,000 down payment assistance on everybody, but the supply change hasn't changed. The supply amount hasn't changed. Now you have all these new buyers entering the market. It's going to exacerbate the program. That's what they're talking about, or the problem. So obviously, both candidates are going to put their best foot forward and paint a rosy picture. I don't see housing coming down anytime soon. I think both of the candidates are running on programs that would create more inflation. No one's going to tell you that. Neither one of them are going to tell you that. But what can we do as real estate investors? Honestly, the best thing to do is learn how to buy off market properties with equity. There's always a deal out there if you know where to find it and know how to negotiate it. That's what we do here in our real estate investment business. And today we are just covering both candidates. Tomorrow's voting day. Make sure you get out there and vote, regardless of who you vote for. And in summary, I don't think either candidate is going to do anything about the rising and high housing costs. Make sure you follow us on our social media channels. All of that's always in the description, and I will see you on the next